Hi, everybody. I'm Jess Boyce, Partner Success Lead at Endless Access. And today we're sitting down with the team behind Backstitch, which, if you are not aware, is a real-time collaboration plugin in Godot. So we're going to talk about why the tool exists, who it's for, and then where it's going. So welcome, everybody. We're going to just do some really quick intros. So what I would love is just like one or two sentences, who you are and what's your stake in Backstitch. So Andrea, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Okay, hi, my name is Andrea Victoria Pavon. I'm in Argentina. I'm learning program specialist at Endless Access, and I'm including Backstitch within our programs. So thank you.
Lilith, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lilith Duncan. I'm one of the lead Backstitch developers, along with Nikita Zatkovich, who is not currently here. There's two of us.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I'm the research director at Ink and Switch, and I helped do some of the initial research that set this project out, and it's really exciting to see how it's taking on a life of its own.
All right, Paul, go for it.
Yeah, I'm Paul. I'm a researcher at Ink and Switch as well, and I kind of like built the initial prototype of Backstitch, and then Lilith and Nikita have taken this on to like turn it into something that's actually useful in a classroom.
Justin, and then Will.
Hi, my name is Justin. I'm an educator. I'm on the learning design team with Andrea. And I spend my time thinking about how to make game design and game development easier for beginners.
I'm Will, based in the UK. I'm 1/3 of the games team at Endless Access. So we're building games, but we're also supporting our learning team. So tools like Backstitch are really helping us to help the learning team.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So we're super happy to have you here. What I want to do to get started to Justin and then Peter, if you could give both of us, or if both of you could give us just a quick intro on Justin, what Endless Access is, and then Peter on what Ink and Switch is. That'd be great.
Sure, yeah. So for us at Endless Access, we are a nonprofit foundation that's dedicated to encouraging learners to explore game design education as part of an attempt to help them build digital skills and ultimately career pathways that can come from this development. So that's what we're currently working on and driving towards. That's part of our bigger mission. So that's us.
Yeah, Ink and Switch is an independent industrial research lab, and we believe that computers could be really incredible tools for thought that help us all sort of flourish intellectually, to grow, to work together, to have better ideas, and see them put into the world. And we've been, for the last decade, we spent our time and energy researching and designing systems that can help make that happen in the real world. And this research is sort of the flower of one of those long planted seeds.
Wonderful. All right, so let's say that someone has never heard of Backstitch before. I would love to hear you just explain what it is and then why it exists. Lilith, I'd actually love to start with you. I heard you do this earlier this week to someone who hadn't heard of it, and so I would love to hear that from you.
Yeah, of course. So when working together on a game in Godot, or in any engine, game developers need a way of sharing their changes with each other. And the usual version control solution is Git, which is a tool that's built for sharing code. But games are a lot more than code. Games include binary assets and structured scene data in particular. And if merge conflicts occur in Git, then those scenes are broken and users need to exit Godot and manually resolve their changes, or more frequently, just give up and remake their changes. So Backstitch is a Godot add-on that provides real-time sync and automatic merging. It's kind of like a Google Doc, if you've ever used a Google Doc where you can all join and collaborate, except it turns your Godot project into something you can all collaborate on and join a session of, where everyone can edit the project simultaneously. It's great for game development teams and especially great for classrooms. And then also, we're also working on the Backstitch web viewer, which is a new feature where by simply visiting a URL, you can play and preview your game or your friend's game directly in the web browser. And this feature in particular is especially great for classrooms, allowing students to share their work instantly with an instructor or a classmate.
Amazing. Is there anything anyone else wants to add on to that?
No, that's great.
No, it's perfectly articulate. All right. So we actually have weekly live episodes called the Loom Lounge, which we will link the one that gives us more of a deep dive into seeing how this tool works as well. So just thinking about the background a little bit. So Andrea, I'd actually love to start with you on this one. So Endless Access was looking to solve a problem within Godot with Backstitch. And so you're someone who was teaching the courses before the Backstitch plugin actually existed. So can you tell us a little bit about like what struggles you had seen that Backstitch then could solve?
Well, actually, we've been doing pilots after pilots of a bunch of programs, and the biggest pain point of all of them, all across the board, was actually Git, especially because of the collaboration aspect of it. I mean, you can work with the Git locally, but the idea was to form teams in every single time we got together with these learners, and it was really hard for them to understand how to use a BCS, a virtual control system, and it was even harder to solve merge conflicts. So we iterated a lot with our programs, but we were still struggling, and we did until Backstitch came along.
Awesome. Justin and Will, would you mind adding on any? What problems did you see that you wanted to solve?
Yeah, Andrea said that really well, and that was a resounding piece of feedback we received constantly, is this extra cognitive load of trying to learn game design for the first time. Oh, and also, by the way, there's this thing called a version control system. And the only thing I would say is that it's not just a technical or user interface challenge. It's conceptually much more complicated than the previous reference that Lilith just mentioned, like Google Docs, that most people are used to. It's so powerful and wonderful in many ways, but that also creates that incredible complexity. So that was a big challenge.
Awesome.
Has been.
Thank you. Will, do you have anything you want to add?
Don't think so.
All right, cool. So how did the two teams find each other? Was there a relationship between Ink and Switch and Endless?
Oh yeah, I can speak to that. So for a very long time, we've been working on this sort of tools for thought problem, and we have a bunch of different lines of research that go into that. And we had gotten in touch with Rob from Endless years ago, just through sort of like mutual kind of community contact. And he had been interested in our work and saw how the learning team had been struggling with Git and version control. And we'd written a paper about similar kinds of problems and how we were solving them for academics and professional writers and these kinds of people. We actually have a whole line of research around how to help sort of journalists and scientists collaborate. And that had been a really interesting set of work. And when Rob said, hey, we have disinterested teenagers who really don't care about this stuff, could you help them too? I thought, like, what an incredible opportunity. Because if we can show that these ideas, which we've tested with these like highly motivated, professionally trained individuals, also work in a classroom setting where you have people who are interested maybe in the topic intrinsically because game development is fun, but like they're not here to do version control. They don't think about their work in terms of these like academic formalisms. If we could show that these ideas could transfer, or even more likely that we could continue to evolve what we think and then bring those ideas back to this broader community, what an amazing opportunity for us as researchers. And so we did these first prototypes, which Paul could say more about, and then to see those ideas starting to take hold and actually work in this new context is just tremendously exciting. Not just because we've been able to take this sort of high status, high context ideas to a different community, but also the way that those things that Lilith and Nikita and Paul are learning in the field, we'll be able to bring back to everybody. So I just love this.
That's incredible. That answered my next question too, which was, you could be working on anything. What made you really want to work on this project? Paul, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, so like another interesting challenge with this project was that like we were working with like an existing game engine like Godot. So like lots of the prototypes we've been building earlier were just like greenfield projects where we just like built everything from scratch. And obviously that like gives you a lot of like freedoms to like be very unconstrained and just like try out completely novel ideas. But also it's kind of like artificial. Like if you're building a prototype, you can like test out some ideas, but it's not really an environment that like people do real work in. And Godot already like has an established community of people that are building real games. And so like that's like a completely different sets of constraints where it's like a very like real context, and like it's incredibly useful to people to like build tools on an existing game engine. But it's also like challenging because you need to like work with basically like a Windows application or Mac application that's built around like file systems and doesn't have any like notion of like syncing changes live, which is both challenging but also like makes our work I think much more useful because we bring it into a context where people actually have needs to do creative work.
I love it. Thank you. So what did the collaboration process actually look like? How did Endless Access and Ink and Switch work together throughout this?
You want to take this, Paul?
Yeah. Yeah, so like very early in the process, we were working very closely with Justin and Will. So like I started out, or like in general, like our approach at Ink and Switch is that we, before we like dive into like building a prototype, we like to try take like a broader lens on the problem and see like what are all the like possibilities of like things that we could be doing or like things that other people have tried. So like initially we just like do lots of sketches or like quick prototypes. And so we call this phase like pre-infusion, where we figure out like what is actually the problem that we try to tackle. So like we had lots of back and forth with Justin and Will, where like I was sketching something or building little prototypes and was showing it to them and like reacting to their feedback, like what are things that are exciting to them and like what are things that might be like less relevant or like things that are surprising, where I thought this is actually like not that interesting, but like Will and Justin pointed out things that are make this super useful in a learning context. And so we tried out a bunch of different ideas, but like what quickly emerged as like the most valuable thing is like having something that like actually works inside of the Godot engine, that you can like use it directly. You don't need to switch to like a separate platform or something. And that's when we hired Nikita, because like I'm more of a generalist. Before I started this project, I don't know much about Godot. And Nikita has had like a lot of background in working with the engine, and so she really helped like figuring out like how to actually do this. And then later Lilith joined us to like actually engineer this and like bring it to the point now where we can actually use this in classrooms for real.
Amazing. That's the great part about collaboration, right? Is that we all bring different ideas. And so the thing that we might think is the most important thing, then you have someone over here that's like, no, actually it needs to be that. I absolutely love it. So what's cool is we've now been seeing it in action, actually been using in real workflows. So Justin, I know you're in the middle of teaching a course right now that's using Backstitch. I'd love to just hear a story or a moment or something where you saw how much this mattered and what a difference it was making.
Yeah, it has been amazing. Like there's a small group that I am working with right now they're using it independently, which is a point to make too, is that as Lilith described what the tool does, it's super valuable even to have that history of your work, to have that persistent timeline, and to be able to experiment using branches. It, just like it is useful even as a solo game maker. And so that's what they're doing. And I would say, I guess the things that have stood out to me are that like feedback, instruction, feedback between peers, all has massively reduced friction now because of how easy it is to share your project back and forth with one another, which creates like an incredible amount of flexibility. On top of that, the ability to join someone's project to help them directly, it all allows for, it's game making is messy, right? So, and it's not linear, and it can go in many different directions, and people have different questions that aren't related to their peers. And so flexibility is not a small thing, and reduced time for feedback is not a small thing. It's been amazing. And that's what we've heard from the learners that are trying it out. And that's how I feel, and the mentor Phoenix that I'm working with as well. It's been invaluable. I think also Paul said keeping this work nearby, not just fast. The feedback is fast. The feedback is also nearby because we are not switching screens cognitively, mentally to go do something else and then taking however long the science says for us all to refocus on the thing that we were trying to do. And I would say that's been amazing. I said earlier that I was here to make game design easier. That's not necessarily not easier, but I want the things that they choose to be hard to be the things that relate to the game design, the creative process of game design, and not something outside of that could sort of get in the way of that.
Can I respond to that?
Of course, please.
So the way I think about intellectual work after we've been working on these problems for a decade is that it never gets easier. There's a saying in professional cycling, it doesn't get easier, you just get faster. Right? And so people are going to put in as much energy and as much passion and as much time as they have for a project. And if they spend that time on messing with the tools and trying to figure out how to get what they're doing done, then they're not going to have that energy to put into the actual work itself. Right? That's just sort of friction that's lost along the way. And so we have this whole line of work that Paul leads, which we call universal version control. And our motto is, nobody's here to do version control, right? People are here to make games. People are here to publish papers. People are here to, do journalism. They've got goals that, like, this is a distraction. We want to make these tools disappear, become invisible, right? So they just become part of this, like, system of support that exists in your tooling that is always there, is always helping you, but you don't have to think about actively as much as possible.
I would say too, in last thing, that's what's happened with this group. Unless I've prompted them to ask them, Lilith, you've been there. Hey, how's Backstitch going? Otherwise, they're not talking about it in the best possible sense. As Peter said, they're not talking about it because it's not a thing that needs to be talked about. It's just working for them on that level.
That's the dream, right? Good design is 99% invisible. We want to disappear into the background.
Yeah. And I did also want to add, just as someone who witnessed, especially that very first class session, where we had users using the web viewer and using Backstitch, it was incredible to see. It was actually like an emotional moment for me, where we were seeing our hard work finally paying off. And as the students shared their web URLs with the instructor, and all of a sudden, like rapid fire, Justin and Phoenix were able to just like go through the Rolodex of student projects in class immediately. That was crazy to watch. And students were playing each other's games. It was a really, really suddenly very collaborative environment that would never have been possible before Backstitch.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing that. That's great.
It's not really a tool. This tool is not set out to like make my life better, but something that I have enjoyed with Backstitch being used in real learning contexts is that we have these moddable mini games that we've built at Endless Access, where we sort of have a skeletal version of Pong or a skeletal version of a platform game, and they go out into the world for learners to riff on. And in the past, we might see a sort of, I'm on a different continent. I'm not classroom facing, so I'd see maybe a few screenshots or little videos. But then just today, Justin sent me a link to someone's game where they had made a very challenging platformer in exactly the way that I like. And so I can click a link and I can play a game that's been made by a student in a different continent without even thinking about it. And it really validates the building of the time we spent building these skeleton projects in the first place, because we can see that we can't just hear that they're reaching people and they're connecting with them and making great things on top of them. We can play them as well.
That's awesome. All right, so Ink and Switch team, as you were building this, there's lots of choices that you had to make. What's something, I think this kind of speaks to Peter talking about that good design is invisible, right? But what's something that Backstitch does intentionally that you think people might not always notice? So working seamlessly.
Yeah, I can grab this one. So this one is something a lot of people have a lot of opinions about, but it's something we always think about very carefully, and that is we're having to carefully thread a needle between ease of use and power features. Because Backstitch isn't just for students. We are making Backstitch for everyone. That is, game developers at every learning level, and game developers at every technical level, right? We're building this not just for students, but also like professional artists who want to work in Godot, or even professional programmers who are used to using Git and are used to having extreme, fine, detailed control over their version control. Developers, so those developers, those power users, they are used to Git. They want complicated things like arbitrary branch merging, cherry picking, a command line interface, but less technical users are going to be confused by a lot of that. And so how do we start to integrate those features of advanced version control in a way that is still palatable to the student? And having that, the answer isn't just like hide it behind a million menus, right? No, we still want all users to be able to use these tools and contribute. Yeah, so something that seems like a missing feature to the developer could be a huge stumbling point for an artist, for example. And so we are very carefully looking at what users are able to do, what they find themselves wanting to do and unable to do, and then constantly re-evaluating how we solve this problem and how we thread this needle of advanced UI. And I think we've done a pretty good job so far. Yeah.
Amazing. Has there been anything that has surprised you as you're watching the ways that people are using Backstitch? Is there something that?
Yeah. One thing that came to mind for me is actually just a couple days ago, Justin said that he was using the web platform to easily test mobile builds on his phone. So he was sort of proposing that rather than doing this process of building the Godot game for the phone, sending it to your phone, and then playing it on your phone, you could just use the Backstitch web viewer and share it with yourself. No, not even collaborating with another person, just collaborating with yourself on a different device. And I hadn't thought of that use case, and I thought that was a really novel and interesting thought of how to use Backstitch.
Can I jump in for a second? The emergent instruction, the whole reduced friction concept or feature that this allows, I didn't know I was going to do that until I did that. And I couldn't have tried that without, there's a level of confidence you have. So, okay, so now I'm going to send it using the web viewer, and oh yeah, I can create a QR code. Now I'm holding my phone up. Now I'm scanning it. Now I'm playing it. Yep, works on mobile. That was fun. I didn't know where I was going with that. And it was prompted by a learner who was curious about something. So you can imagine the difference if that learner is curious about that. And I go, let me get back to you in a few days, versus being able to instantly try and go, who knows where this is going to go? And we're all going to be okay. That was the feeling we kind of had, as I was going through that. And then I reset everything I had done real quick.
That's amazing. So Lilith, you were talking a bit about how this isn't just for in an education setting, right? This is for everybody. So the educators themselves, but learners, game developers, studios, all sorts of folks. So as things have come together, and anyone can jump in and answer this, but what do you think it changes for each of those groups? So looking at a different perspective.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for essentially, as we look at this, different users are going to have slightly different priorities of how they want to work in Backstitch. And we need to develop Backstitch to be generic enough to support those workflows. A big example is how users interact with branches. So in a game development team, what they're used to doing and what they want to do and what they probably should be doing is they branch off their code as a feature branch, right? Where they branch off, implement a particular feature until it's complete, and then merge that back into the main branch. For students, on the other hand, if you have lots of students working in a project, very frequently instructors will set up a system where each user has a user branch. And so each user works individually, and then maybe only at the end of the week do they merge back into main, or maybe they don't. Maybe they don't do that at all. Which seems like it would be the same tooling, but it's that merging part that actually it's a huge difference, right? Because with user branches, they want to merge main back into their branches and continue reusing that branch. Whereas with feature branches, they want to make a whole new branch for a whole new feature and delete the old branch. And on our agenda of things to support is to work through both of those workflows and make sure that those can both be first-party workflows that Backstitch supports without making it, again, too complicated, so that it degrades the usage of either one of those.
I can build a bit on what Lilith was saying there, which is that we've seen similar habits in newsrooms. And I think what Lilith is talking about is that every team is different, every collaboration is different, right? If you're a small indie game team and you have a programmer and an artist, that collaboration is going to look different than when you're in a classroom with students. But no two classrooms are the same either, right? And no two programs are the same, and no two communities are the same, and everybody develops different workflows that work for them and tries new things. And so our goal is not to codify a single workflow as the right way to do things, because we know that every team is different. What we're trying to do is to find a small set of really useful sort of basic primitives that anyone can recombine to meet their needs in the moment.
Love it. Thank you. Andrea, and then Justin, if you want to touch on this as well, as you both work really closely with the learners themselves, what do you think a tool like Backstitch changes for someone who's just starting out? So think of those like super young game developers. How can this be beneficial to them?
Well, actually, what Justin was mentioning before, the fact that we want people creating video games, even just the construction of a level, the prototype of a level, it's a lot of work because of the multidisciplinary things that make up that level. And Backstitch will be there to support the hardest part, the pain points, the biggest pain point that we always had. So I'm super happy to be able to use this tool in that sense. And back to that, to the brain workload that gets super smooth. And on the end of the teacher side, because we are always also thinking about the teachers, being able to see, as you guys mentioned, what the learner is doing in real time, both individually and within their group, it's invaluable. That's a lot of time that we can save to make our programs and our classrooms better. I'm sorry, but that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
That's great. Justin, is there anything you want to add on to that?
There's so much, so I better one thing it does is it does on a basic level, hopefully, as we develop, as Lilith and the team develop it more and more, it just can give learners, younger learners, fulfill some of the expectations they have from other tools they're very used to using. So they should be, you would think it would be expected that there's a reset button, Control-Z, undo until I feel like I'm done undoing. But there isn't necessarily that in the same form they're used to without something like Backstitch giving them that. So there is the cognitive load of all these tools they're learning, but there's also just a learner works on something that for a really long time and realizes they need to make significant changes. And do they want to manually reset completely? Do they want to try to undo all the things they've done for the last several hours by themselves? And will that discourage them a little bit rather than keep them moving forward? So these tools do that. Those things that they've I think have come to expect from a lot of the creative tools and learning tools they use. But the other thing it does is visually show a thing that is very cross-disciplinary, and it's just a thing that we all have to learn as adults, is how to break big problems down into smaller pieces. That's already there with version control, right? But now it's visual. You can actually see the branch. So you have a level branch, and underneath it you have stuff I'm doing with the enemies, stuff I'm doing with the hero character, the tile map, all of it broken down. It's almost calming to know that you can dive in and work on smaller pieces of something and not have to stress about the larger picture, which is really, really hard for learners to internalize. And all of us learn that as we get older. So it's great that it does.
It so much more approachable, right? I know even for myself as not a game developer whatsoever, it could be really overwhelming whenever you go in and see all of that. So those digestible bites are really important. I love that. Paul, from a research perspective, who else do you think should be paying attention to this beyond Godot people or the education world?
Yeah, so like Peter was already talking a little bit about this. So like one thing that we're hoping to get out of this is like to actually see like how are students using these like version control primitives. Like we already talked to a lot of people that like really like using Git but want to use that for more stuff, like want to use that for their writing as well. And here we're coming from the opposite side where we have students that like don't have like experience with version control system. They know more like they're more familiar with something like Google Docs. And so they approach, like even if you give them the same tools, they will approach them completely differently. And I think there is a huge opportunity here to learn from this perspective as well and bring that back to professionals to like maybe make their tools easier as well. And also like I'm hoping more broadly figuring out like how to integrate like these new tools on top of like existing systems, I think could be like a huge thing that like lots of research, or like it's always nice in research to like just build a system from scratch, but like people like have the tools that they want to like continue using. They want like the features integrated in the environment that they're already in. So I think this is another huge opportunity to learn more like how to do that, like come to the users where they already are and bring them the features in this environment rather than like convincing them to like switch completely over to this like new world that works completely different.
I mean, Will, you've been developing with version control for decades, and you find it valuable and have integrated it with some of your practice now, right?
Yeah, so it's particularly when when the people working closely together on this quite big project or on different continents, it's super useful, even though we use Git for the kind of long-term storage of our game threadbare. Being able to do live collaboration just within our team of people who are really good at Git is already, Git does not make that enjoyable to do. We had an in-person Hackfest a couple of years ago. Justin, you were there, and we were, a room full of experienced version control users constantly treading on each other's toes. If we had this then, that in-person Hackfest would have gone a lot better. But to what Paul was saying, like when I was first sort of starting to think about some of these things, I was asking around my friends who have more of a background in games, like how do people avoid conflicts in industry? And the answer from everyone is like, well, you just have a special hat, and only the person with the special hat is allowed to touch the main scene. And it may not be a physical hat; it could be some other token. But basically, that's the state of the art is the special hat technique. So I think this is a really useful existence proof that a better world actually is possible. Like, you can do better than the special hat or fancier special hats. You can just have the software do the hard work for you, which is sort of supposed to be the point of good tools. So I think that's, as you say, Paul, showing that you can actually bring these workflows to real tools is really valuable.
And I think what's been great about working with Endless is that, our team is a research group, and Endless brought us a community that we could work for with new and interesting problems, but then have continued to invest into this work to take it from Paul's woolly, barely strung together prototype, which had obvious potential but totally blew up in your face if you looked at it wrong, and to continue to invest in that work and bring it to a level of maturity where it actually works in a classroom was no small feat, right? And kudos to Lilith and Nikita, who have, from the outside, it kind of looks like, okay, well, you had it working a year ago, and like, what have you done for the last year? It kind of looks the same. And it's like, well, we've really rebuilt the entire core, from the ground up to go from this reedy research prototype into something that is classroom ready. And thank you so much to Will and Justin for suffering through this every step of the way as we have, just worked through all of the feedback and the problems that they've found and all the real world discoveries that happen when you take an interesting concept and try and put it in the classroom. And, I think we're finally crossing that threshold, as we've said, into, classroom ready software. And, it's really the beginning of a journey, I would say. Right? Like, now we can learn a whole new set of things, because you learn a lot of new things when you go from, hey, this is like a proof of concept, to like, hey, this is a real thing that's being used in a classroom. I'm so excited to see what happens as we get more and more kind of usage from a bigger and bigger community, and we can continue to feed that back both into that community, but also to harvest what we're learning there and share it across all the different work that we do.
Yeah, so it's still pretty alpha, right? Even though there's been the time, we'll still consider it in its alpha stage. In this early stage, what have you seen that works really well? And then can you let us in on a little bit of like what you think is still kind of rough?
Yeah, I can answer that. So like, people absolutely love the intended happy path. Like, when it's working, amazingly positive feedback. I am blown away by the ability of users to just immediately, effortlessly integrate with this. But also, we are a team of 2 developers currently, and Backstitch is just getting off the ground. And there's some bugs around, especially syncing and file system indexing, that can cause some pain points for users. An example is that Backstitch currently can't see local changes made while Godot is closed. So Godot has to be open while you're modifying things, which is usually good for most Godot developers, but it's not something you want to have to worry about. Thankfully, I'm working on that now, and I'm just finishing up a task that should address that in particular. But I would say that the biggest current barrier to integrating this software more widely is that we're still relying on a custom fork of Godot. Now, with Godot 4.7, which is currently in beta and is currently getting patches, we've actually upstreamed a lot of work to Godot. So we've fixed a ton of bugs in Godot to make this happen, and pretty much everything we need is merged now. And we're hard at work getting Backstitch ready for a Godot asset store release, which Godot asset store is also brand new. So that's going to be interesting, and I'm looking forward to it.
That's fantastic. So you touched a little bit about the feedback that you've been hearing. Has there been anything that you've heard that has changed your thinking about maybe directions that you're going or anything like that?
I can answer that too. So I was recently extremely thrilled to see a completely third-party independent dev team made a game using Backstitch in a game jam, which is crazy. It's like not anyone from Endless, nobody I had talked to my knowledge. They just saw Backstitch and thought I would love to contribute to this and test this in a game jam. And yeah, they made a whole game. It's called Companion Plant. And they provided some really, really helpful feedback. Again, they really loved the happy path where collaboration felt effortless, I believe was a quote. When it worked really well. But then the bugs that they ran into and the issues they ran into, some of them were actually novel, and I just had not seen anyone run into that. And a big part of that is probably that most of the test cases we've seen have been students and not game developers. So they also pointed out a couple features. I mentioned how we were threading the needle between power features and easy to use stuff. They pointed out a couple things that they need as power users, and things that we can prioritize and try our best to integrate in a friendly way, such as arbitrary branch merging into any other branch. And that's sort of something I'm thinking about as we're looking to improve on the features of Backstitch.
Incredible. Well, congratulations. What a fun moment to discover that. I can only imagine how good that feels. So I know you touched on this a little bit earlier, but what's the goal for Backstitch from here? What does the next phase look like?
That's, I think, getting this out there to people that can do testing in their own teams. We mentioned earlier, people use software in wildly different ways, and people have wildly different needs. And the more hands we get this into, and the more people we talk directly to get feedback, just like Companion Plant, the better Backstitch is going to be able to be. And I think that getting this into the asset store for Godot 4.7 is going to be pivotal in that, because now you don't have to run a custom launcher to set up the correct version of Godot. You can just drop it into any project that you want.
So if someone that's watching this or reading the blog post, we talked about all different roles, right? Education, developers, indie, game jam people, like all the things. If they're seeing this and they're like, oh my gosh, I want to use this, what should they do? And is there anything that's different between those roles? Would an indie developer do the same thing that an educator would do?
Yeah. So we have a website, backstitch.dev. That is a great place where you can read documentation, getting started guides, link to our GitHub, and importantly, it has a link to join our Discord server. And if you join our Discord server, you can talk with us directly and give us the feedback. You can go, oh no, Backstitch has a missing feature. Please implement this. And we'll go, okay, cool. We'll do that. That URL is backstitch.dev. And I'd say that Backstitch is suitable in its current state for almost every level of game development. Everyone's going to use it slightly differently, but we've had at this point professional game developers use it and enjoy it, and it works well. And also students in classrooms use it as well. So kind of no matter who you are, if you're interested in giving it a shot, even if you're a solo dev, I think there's a lot of value to giving Backstitch a try. And yeah.
Excellent. Well, that was my next question, was going to be, how do we find you? How do we make sure that everyone has access? So we'll make sure that we'll link all of those things, the Discord server, etc. So before we wrap, is there anything that anyone else wants to add?
I wanted to ask Lilith something to confirm it, but when Jess, you say the word access and who's this suitable for, I was just reminding myself, Lilith, it is true that a lot of these features that you say are useful for someone developing by themselves are also useful offline.
Yes, exactly. I was actually going to bring that up. That was one of the last things I was going to mention. So Backstitch, currently we have an alpha test server that you can connect to. You can also run your own server if you want to have more privacy over your data. But crucially, Backstitch also works if you don't connect to any server at all. It is able to run completely locally on your machine. You won't be able to like collaborate with other users, of course, but yeah, and that's really important and really crucial to me.
I agree.
Because if you look at software, comparable software, like something like Google Docs or Miro or other cloud platforms, they have complete ownership over your data on the server. If Google one day decides to turn off their servers, then all of your Google Docs are gone, just erased from existence. You cannot access them anymore unless you have a backup. And
It made me a little anxious.
yeah, right?
Oh gosh.
I don't think that should be the way the world works, right? So this at Backstitch, we're working with Godot, obviously, and Godot stores the stuff on your local file system. So by integrating this into an existing platform, we not only are we doing this local first, which is really good just for the software community in general, but also when you're integrated into an existing platform like this, you're forced to do that. And I think that we are, by integrating this into like third-party open source software that exists, that's a really important and powerful thing where we can sort of set the standard for local first work. And version control, even real-time version control to work together.
Yeah, I think maybe it'd be good to give a bit of a shout out to the AutoMerge team as well here. So what we're building in Backstitch and in our sort of other sibling project Patchwork that this grew out of is what we're calling universal version control. And that's actually building on a collaboration engine that we've been working on for almost a decade now at Ink and Switch. And that's an open source, BSD licensed project that anyone can use. And, Backstitch is like this incredible field test of this technology, but it's also being used commercially by startups, and we use it at the lab, and there's open source projects all around the world building on this. The idea behind AutoMerge is that, in traditional kind of cloud systems, the server holds all the data, and it's the authoritative source of what you have, and it controls who can access it and who can download it and when you can use it. And what we're doing with AutoMerge is trying to invert that relationship. So everybody who uses a piece of software has an authoritative copy with the full history of how things got to be the way they are. And when you make changes, we record them and store them locally. And the server just becomes kind of like a hub for shuttling data back and forth. It holds a copy of the data because that way, you can fetch it if your, collaborator's laptop is closed. It's a problem if you can't do that. But it isn't the authoritative source. And if that server goes away, you can just get a new one, right? The server is just another, element of the system that's disposable, replaceable, versus the current model where the server controls it, owns it, and you have to hope that somebody will keep that thing running forever or else your project goes away. And so, this AutoMerge project is something that we're really proud of and is the sort of database that powers all of this and is a thing that, again, we're going to continue to invest in for many years to come. And so, just the other day, actually, we saw someone inspired by Lilith and Paul's work who took AutoMerge and built it into a totally different indie game engine inspired by this work that the team has been doing. And so, that's really really a joy to see that kind of thing happen. And so, it's what we're doing with Backstitch is not just sort of building a product, right? This is a thing that people can use. It's also trying to show the world, hey, things could be better. You don't have to, it's like once you've had the sort of scales fall from your eyes, wow, it doesn't have to be like this. Like things could be better. I don't have to suffer the way I have been. And that's just such a joy to see happening.
Amazing. Well, you all should be so proud of the work that you're doing. Super excited to see how things progress as well, and catch Backstitch out in the wild in more places. So thank you all so much for this. What we're going to do too is have a full write-up of this conversation as a blog post. We'll make sure everything is linked. But really, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time out of your day to have such a good conversation. This is all really exciting stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Jess. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
And
Thanks for hosting those.
it's